We're in this series Becoming Freer, one step at a time. And today's step is change, first settling. We've been through the invitation and we've moved, and now we've been in this new pattern for some time. And it's worth pausing and listening and accepting the aspects of what being in a new change for a bit means. And afterwards, we'll look back. We can look back and see that there's healing and growth that has happened. Transformation. So, this first settling means that you know that you're in a new pattern after coming from a comfort zone of an old pattern. This image shows that. There's a little bit more light in where you're going. It's not totally light yet. There's a whole lot that's still to be revealed. And in the newness of this new territory or pattern, you will experience some versions of the unfamiliar, like not knowing, pining for what is left behind, bated breath, will I, won't I, sometimes excitement and sometimes am I going the right way. All of these and any face of this unfamiliar is to be expected. And it's a bit like this roller coaster image. You've left the old stability behind and you haven't got the stability of the new. And I'm going to tell a story about that. So, early in my life, it happened that I moved into solving problems. Anything that was distressing for me or I noticed with other people, I moved immediately into solving problems. Later on, I found that that wasn't the way to go. So I needed to change a new pattern to think, do I need to do it like this without thinking or not? And so I'd lost the old stability, but I didn't know how successful it would be when I stopped and thought about it. So these outcomes of not being sure, they are natural in this transition time of first settling. And what has happened is that the old pattern pulled strongly. So when I first started trying to change this pattern, it was like an umbilical cord pulling me back to immediately solve the problem and not think about, did I need to take on board something of what it was inviting me to be present to. And the reason for that strong pulling back was that the pattern was like having made a deep rut in my rhythm patterns. And as you look at this rut, you can see that it'd be pretty hard if you were driving a car along. Well, it would have to be a truck. If you were driving a truck along there, you wouldn't be able to get out of it easily. You'd have to go along further until it wasn't such a deep rut. So these patterns that we have, which are attached to every habit that we have, they get as deep as that and they are difficult to move. Now, for us, in our first settling, it's not about difficult to move, it's about balancing the pattern with a new neural pathway. The old one can still operate when it's appropriate, and the new one has to gain purchase. Another reaction within a new pattern and the first settling is there's still fear of the unknown. And the unknown is something like leaping from the stability of the known patterns of the old into the unknown of the roller coaster. So what do you do? It's really important that when you feel this fear, that you name it and that you take notice of when there's a sense of pulling back to the old pattern when really the new pattern is the one that should be the one that you're going with. And here's a little bit of consolation. Every time you operate in the new pattern, a new track pathway is being set in your rhythm patterns. And later, it too will deepen and become a rut. But on this particular behaviour, it will never be as deep as the old pattern here. It will only be a balancing of the old when appropriate. So I'm repeating, every do contributes to a new track. And here is an example. This track is starting to be real. It hasn't got pullback energy in it, and yet it's still starting to have an effect, starting to become a rhythm. Then, as well as that rhythm, there's an emotional level about a first settling to a more comfort zone. And here, the more comfort zone is the important issue. So, we put on a new pattern. We're uncomfortable. This one is at the first settling. The discomfort has soaken down to the bottom. The second image on the right is to show what will happen later on, not at this first settling. The old pattern, emotional content, will be much lower and therefore have much power. And the balancing pattern will have much more pleasure and understanding and knowing and stability. And the reality is that between this emotional and rhythm developing, that something new is coming to birth. Something new for you. And that new is some form of healing and growth. So every time you operate in this new pattern, you're nurturing the new birth and strengthening the neural pathway. And this just shows how this is happening in the whole of your life. Something has germinated and it's needing to be nurtured, and yet it's really there, emotionally and in rhythm terms. There will be many more repetitions before you come to more comfort than you've got at this first level of settling. And a way that we can help ourselves to move forward peacefully and graciously is to remember that this new pattern coming to birth fulfills the allure of that first invitation to move. And so, when we first started out in our new pattern, it's like a hole is left in our pattern system, and there's a struggle to move into the new. And as you're at this first settling level, there's a promise becoming clearer. And so we've paused and listened and accepted the realities of this first settling step. And it's worth knowing right now that at the end of this transition to a new pattern, which is not there yet, this is step 4, you will find you have experienced new growth and healing. So on the left-hand image, you can see how the growth has extended, metaphorically, and over on the right-hand image, you can see that this pattern will be, with a few more steps, will be integrated appropriately into your life experience.